think?
Yeah, I'm happy wherever you want to go.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. And today we're talking about man. We're dealing with male issues today. Usually we deal with mostly general things, but today we're specifically homing in on men because we need our men to be healthy. We need our men to know it's okay not to be
Yep.
okay. That's that's funny, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we need
Absolutely.
our men to be okay, to know it's okay not to be okay, and no one is going to judge them. So for each
Yeah.
man that is there, we say kudos to you. Welcome. Thank you for taking that bold step of joining us. And I'm sure we'll have a good time here. We have Gavin with us this evening, and I'm sure Gavin is going to take us on a jolly good ride. So to start off with, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm going to say who I am, what I do, and then I'm going to introduce Gavin. Then we dive into it, Gavin. And that'll be the evening in a nutshell. So here goes. I am Duntan West. I'm the founder and managing director of Refreshed Healthy Living. Refresh is the organization bringing the Refresh series to you. So following some major health challenges in the past and being fortunate enough to have forward-thinking doctors and medical support that emphasized on diet change to be one of the catalysts to make me recover fast and to recover well, I had nothing to lose really but life. So I took their advice and changed my diet and started paying more attention to my well-being. And I was amazed at how simple changes had a great impact on me. This led me to wanting to know more about the impact of food on us and the lifestyles we choose for ourselves as well on our health in total. This my journey for seeking more about well-being and food led me to get formal education in nutrition and well-being, as it were, and I became an integrative health coach and hormonal coach. Apart from the fact that I am an event planner as well. So what I do is I try to bring all these three things into my daily life. Plan my life, plan events, make sure I'm healthy, and make sure my goal is to make the next person healthy as well. So because I'm not selfish, I like to share, as I've said. We started off this Refresh series by talking to people about their mental well-being. And this started off during the pandemic when I would say my nephew actually started this journey of Refresh series. Before the Refresh series, it's something called the Refresh Day, which was our give back to the society. I live in Nigeria, and if you're conversant with Nigeria, healthcare is very expensive, and it's not easily accessible. Good healthcare, I must say, is not easily accessible to the general public, especially those in the lower income. So the organization, my team, my partner, and I decided that we would take health to people. So we usually have a health day. We collaborated with other people. We partner with other people, doctors, captains of industries to come together, and we have a day called Refresh Day. On that day, we do everything to your well-being. I'm sure you know that your food is not what makes you healthy. But the other things make you. There are other dimensions to well-being, which are career, relationship, spirituality, just to mention a few of those things. So we bring all this in, including food, to have just a one day of wellness where people can come in free of charge, and all our partners came in free of charge as well. And we pour up ourselves to these people so that they can go home and at least they have some form of health till when next we meet. COVID came, we couldn't do this anymore, and we're just at a limbo. Then in the middle of COVID, my nephew came, and I just realized that he's one of those children you call the pandemic babies. He was born during just on the outset of COVID, and as he was growing up, all he knew was rub, 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 and rub, rub meant put sanitizer on my hands and let me rub. So my nephew is just 2. So all he did was, oh, can I have rub? And I thought this is really pathetic. And when he wanted to calm him down, we'd say to him, oh, we'll take you outside. And that really calmed him down. He just loved the fact that he could run outside and he could play. And this was for us was a normal norm for us, really. We could all go out, but during the pandemic, we were all locked down. We couldn't go out. So for him, going out was a luxury. And that's how the Refresh series started. So we have done quite a few of this series. If you've missed them, or if you're joining us for the first time and you've missed them, please go to our YouTube page where all our series are on. This particular one will be on our YouTube page and on our IG Live page, on our IG page as well. That's a bit a nutshell about what led to the Refresh series. Who are we at Refresh? Refresh Healthy Living. So what we offer services that are designed to add value beyond healthy living and well-being to your life. We look at you holistically and see what's wrong with you. No, not what's wrong with what we can do to help you get the best version of yourself. So one of such processes is what we're doing today. We're giving you this free. I'm sure if you were to go to Gavin for a session, you won't have it for free, right, Gavin? Everything's at a cost. But Gavin has come, he's given up his time to come and speak to us this evening about men, about toxicity in men. But we'll come to that yet. So one of the practical steps is what one of the practical steps we do. We're also aware that you'll not be able to take all the information at once, what Gavin is going to say, because it might be information overload. But I would say to you, take your pen, jot down the notes. But if you missed anything, it's okay. It's going to be on our IG page and it's going to be on our YouTube page. So I would say to you now, because we're about to start this train going, get your pens, tell your friends to join. And if you want to, we are here available. If you want to speak to us at Refresh Healthy Living, if you want us to coach you, please DM us or send us a message. It won't be free. It will be at a very tiny cost. But I'm sure you know that you'd rather pay that cost than to pay your medical bills. So let's get the evening started. So who do we have today? We have Gavin. Gavin originally was a hospitality professional. So you understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about being an event planner, right?
Yeah.
And we all know that being in the event industry is one of the most stressful industries in the world. I think it ranks between the 6th and the 5th of the list. But we're not counting what it is, but all we know is that it's stressful. We want to distress. We want to make sure that we serve you better in your obstetric industry. So Gavin, as a professional, now a business development strategist, specializing in assessing and improving sales performance and sales processes, often through training and mentoring of all sales team. As I said to you, the obstetric industry is very, very stressful. Gavin at some point had some personal mental issues and others close to him to had. So Gavin has now decided to specialize in mental health first aid training to improve attitudes to mental health and well-being in the workplace, which is very, very key. This will improve, and this is to improve morale, loyalty, productivity, employee well-being. You know, if we know that if our employees are well looked after, we know that productivity will go up because there'll be less people taking time off work. So it's really key to make sure that your staff are really well looked after mentally, physically, emotionally. And this is one of the things Gavin does, and this is what we do as health coaches as well. So we train people, train organizations, individuals, and I'm sure Gavin does the same as well. So Gavin's passion is to encourage companies to develop mental health and well-being strategies that work, changing the culture within those businesses. And today I say to you, meet Gavin. Gavin, have I introduced you well? And
Yeah, absolutely.
I forgot to tell them you're the managing director of building balancing edges.
Yeah. So Balancing Edges is the company that I've used to get out this message about mental health, and as you said there, my passion is to create cultures within businesses that make or reduce the stigma and discrimination around mental health, break those barriers down, really, because we all know the stigma exists. It's obviously one of the few good things about the pandemic is actually that those barriers are slightly coming down. People are more understanding that it's affecting their mental health and are more willing to talk about it. So we can use that opportunity to encourage people to talk more, to break those barriers down. But that's really what we're talking about today, about toxic masculinity is what I've called it. Is a well-known term that's used to describe this sort of barriers that men put up around themselves to protect that masculinity, which is a false reality, really. Why should men particularly be stronger, in inverted commas, or braver, or more silent than the female gender? There's no reason at all why that should be the case, other than history and genetics, I suppose. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today, I guess, is how that affects people's mental health, and what could we do to change that direction, what can we do as a society, as well as individual companies, what can we do to improve things. So that's really what the subject is tonight.
Yeah. So the subject is toxic masculinity.
You say that.
That's it. That's a bit much on my tongue. Toxic
masculinity and how it affects everything.
And how it affects our mental well-being. So in men, and I'm sure you're wondering why we're focusing on the men today. And that's because really, and Gavin, please correct me if I'm wrong, statistically it's been proven that men suffer more mental issues than women, and that's because they don't talk. Women, they bottle in, but a woman would have a chit chat, would have a coffee, would go to a friend, would cry, would moan, would just let it out. But men just keep everything up because they think that's been manly. So today, and I'm glad it's coming from Gavin as well, who is a man, so it won't be it won't be my perspective, but it'll be from a man, a real man that cries. So Gavin, what are the varying viewpoints about the term toxic oh gosh, I'll get that right. Toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
How do you define the term?
Okay, so there's lots of different definitions around toxic masculinity, and a lot of it talks around historical views around masculinity, which perhaps are a little bit old-fashioned now. There's really three core points, two of which I think are relevant to our discussion tonight, and one of which I don't think is. So it's really about that suppressing emotions, or making distress around those things. So people not opening up about their feelings. So men not opening up about their feelings is the first element of it. The second element is maintaining that appearing to be strong, in inverted commas, that hardness, feeling that they need to appear strong. The third element is an element that I don't believe is something that would touch on mental health, but it is something that is referred to with toxic masculinity, which is the use of violence as an indicator of power. Now, in my view, yes, I'm sure that is the case in terms of historical toxic masculinity, but in terms of mental health, that's not something that I see as being part of toxic masculinity with regard to mental health. It may be a way that some people manifest itself in terms of poor mental health, and it's like a defense mechanism to perhaps refer to that. And we may talk about that as we go through the rest of the chat today. But in terms of my viewpoint on toxic masculinity, as far as mental health is concerned, it's those first two things: suppressing emotions and maintaining that appearing strong, in inverted commas. What the definition of strong is, but not showing weakness, I guess. Again, weakness in inverted commas.
So would you say society has shaped men to just do that, or do you just think it's something that has been ingrained? Because I mean, you hear that.
I think it's a combination. It's a combination, Duntan. It's partly historical viewpoint. It's partly, as a child, you're told, as a boy, you're told, man up. Boys will be boys. Don't cry, be a big boy. Those are the kind of things you're told when you're growing up, and that creates the behaviour. So it's in my generation. I'm 62, so I'm an older generation guy, a baby boomer. That was definitely the case when I was younger. I think it's changing, but it's still there to some extent. It's still there. That requirement from even your parents to not show weakness, and that's going to have an effect on you as you grow older. There's no doubt that's going to have an effect as you grow older. But it's more than that. There's also peer pressure, particularly in male groups. There's peer pressure to be strong, in inverted commas, and not show weakness, and to not talk about things. If you are seen to be talking about stuff, that some reactions might be, don't be a girl's blouse, grow up, be man up, don't start talking like that, don't be wet. So there's peer pressure on you, and what we've got to try and do is create that peer pressure the opposite direction. Make it actually, why aren't you talking about it, and do it that way. So there is that, those sort of words like man up and boys with boys, those expressions sort of create that advocates for careless, aggressive, or otherwise damaging behaviour in those young males, that sort of teaches them about the responsibility and owning up to their mistakes. So it's kind of created at a very young age, I believe. And it's kind of expected and ingrained into the gender that that's how you're going to be. So it's a difficult one to get out of, because it's been ingrained into culture.
Yeah, so this is something the children, the boys, really have grown up with.
Yeah.
Turning to teenagers and turn to men. So when they do have issues as men, they're able to express themselves. So would you?
Yeah, I think. Go ahead.
So I mean, for parents or parents to be on this, would you suggest, or would you say that as a female child has emotions, so does a male child? And if you allow a female child to express her emotions, we should allow the male child to express his emotions as well, so they're well-rounded individuals.
Yeah, and I think it is changing, but it's changing slowly. I think there's also a genetic element there as well. The males are sort of the hunter-gatherers, and there's some genetic factors there as well, which may be more difficult to change. Although, again, I think that's changing. As society becomes more multi-gender, I think that will continue to change as well. So hopefully those barriers will be broke down. But those views will cause harm and embellish the idea of masculinity, which lead to more toxic attitude towards those behaviours, because it's self-generating. If you get a culture of a group of men where it's not okay to not be okay, then the people aren't going to open up, are they? Because that peer pressure is there. So why would they open up? And if they do open up and get shouted down and get told, don't be a girl's blouse or man up or whatever it might be, then they're not going to, that will stop other people in the group talking, because one person's been victimized in that way. And that stigma and discrimination is very prevalent, And I've experienced that myself. You know, I've had mental health problems in my past, and I didn't tell anybody about it because, you know, that wasn't what I did. I was meant to be the brave one and the strong one, you know, not show weakness. And eventually, I did speak to my wife about it, and I did get some support. I did get some help, and I got through it. But you know, if I hadn't have done that, I'd have been going down that mental health. I call it a mental health spiral. You know, we're all floating around at the top of that spiral, but as we get negative thoughts, you go down that spiral, don't you? And as you go down that spiral, your thoughts get more negative and more negative. So you go down the spiral further and further and deeper and darker. And so it's self-generating. And if you don't get help as you're starting to go down that spiral gets faster and faster and deeper and deeper. And so we've got to try and break that spiral as early as we can in the process. And if men aren't going to do that, and I'm generalizing when I say this, you know, some men will seek help, and men will open up and talk about their feelings. But there's no doubt the majority of men will not. And in some cultures, that's even more of a stigma than it is in other cultures. You know, there's a cultural difference here as well, which we need to bear in mind, especially with an international audience that we're talking to tonight. You know, the cultural stigma and discrimination is even stronger than in some other cultures.
Interesting. So what got you interested in this particular topic? Why this subject?
Well, it came around because of the statistics about suicide. I was looking at the statistics around suicide because fairly much internationally, certainly in the UK, I know for a fact what the figures are in the UK. 75% of suicides are male and 25% are female. That's pretty similar right around the world. Okay, there's a much higher prevalence of male suicide than female suicide. It'll vary between 66 and 80% male suicides, but it's pretty even around that 75%. So why is that? You know, I know some of the reasons. I've been, I was instructed on how to teach mental health first aid. I was given some reasons, but it seemed to me that there was a lot more to it than perhaps I'd been told. And I looked into it in more detail, and this toxic masculinity kept popping up in subjects. So I just read more around it and more about it and more about it, and there's a lot of interesting articles around it. Some of them are very emotional, some of them are very one-sided, but you know, the reality as a man, I know what it's like as a man. You know, I'd never talk to my friends about mental health. You know, that would just not happen. Whereas my wife, if she goes out for a few drinks with the girls, one of them's feeling a bit low, they'll hear that and they'll talk about that. Why should that be the case? You know, so there's not one single reason around this suicide figure. Obviously, toxic masculinity is not the only reason why that's happened, but it's one of the stronger reasons why. You know, that not talking up or opening up about their feelings and trying to appear strong and not be weak in inverted commas is one of the main reasons why male suicides are at that level, because men will often self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. And we know that drugs and alcohol is a very strong stimulator towards that suicidal behavior.
Exactly.
And so, you know, that is another issue. So men, rather than talking to their mates about it, will hit the bottle or hit the drugs, or both. And that is not healthy, for one thing. It is also, we know that alcohol is a depressant, so that doesn't help things. And we also know that alcohol and drugs will create that atmosphere where a man might make, or anyone, that doesn't need to be a man, but we're talking about masculines, toxic masculinity here. But anyone who gets drunk will make decisions they wouldn't do if they were sober. And that might involve a suicidal decision. And if that is the case, they're more likely to make that spontaneous decision that they wouldn't make if they were sober. And because men are more likely to self-medicate than women, they're more likely to make that spontaneous decision that they wouldn't otherwise have made. So that those inhibitions are lowered, and their behaviour becomes more erratic as well. So, and we all know that. We've probably all been there in terms of not behaving as we would do if we were sober. But that if you're in a bad place, in a dark place, in that spiral, you down that deep dark place, then the behaviour becomes more erratic and more unpredictable, and can involve suicidal behaviour. So those two main reasons are both linked, I think, and they are two of the main reasons why that suicide figure is 75% male and 25% female, 3 to 1.
And that's so true. That you said about men self-medicating. I mean, my husband, it would take him a lot for him to get into the doctor. He seems to know what is wrong with him, and he knows what medication to take. And I'm like, dude, you should have been a doctor then.
Yeah, I think that's probably most of the male gender, Duntan's, I'm afraid. So yeah,
and they don't like to seek help, because even I don't know. I mean, and I'm talking from my own experience here, that even when it comes when I know that there's something on his mind, it takes a lot of patience, a lot of talking to before I'm able to get him to offload what's on his mind. And there's that adage that says a problem shared is a problem halved. And each time he says I nag him, which I don't, I just try to help him get it out.
I feel his pain, though. I feel his pain.
Each time I try to help him to get it out, to help him empty his head, by the time we finish talking, it's actually in a better place. It's much better. It feels more relaxed. And I realized that at that point as well, it sleeps better, because this doesn't just affect you physically. It affects your sleep. It affects your workload. It affects so many other things that you do. And
absolutely.
And it's just the fact that I keep on saying to him, it's okay, babes, it's okay, just let it out. I would come home, I would want to talk, I would want to say this happened, I want to say that happened. I'm like, because I'm in my safe place, and I'm like, you're in your safe place, you should be able to talk. But it's, as you said, it's that growing up, trying to make sure you're the problem solver, you're the one that's protected.
I've got to be the brave one.
Diminish all that responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very typical. And as I say, I've been there myself. And I would say, even though I teach this stuff, there's still times when I do that, even though I know what I'm doing myself and I'm very aware of it. There are still times where I will bottle things up and hold things in rather than trying to be open with it, because I need to be the brave one. I need to hide from people what my emotions are. And I was brought up that way, and I'm sure there's a genetic factor, but there's also that nature nurture thing, isn't it? I was nurtured to be like that, and nature has brought me to that position as well. So there's that nature nurture discussion about what makes you that way. I think it's a bit of both. There's an element of both attached to it.
And and as you said, so and I think we've had that. This affects us in a larger way than just our homes as well, because our men are the ones that go out, and if we like it or not, our men are mostly on the C-suite executives, so they're making decisions for us, in quote, in the government as well. You see those in parliament, those in our House of Assembly and Senate. It's mostly male dominated, and if these men are not, I don't want to use the word balance, but if their minds are not free, if they're like, there's toxicity in them, you'd find that the decisions they make that affects me, you, and the whole world is not balanced. It's actual, they've been from a place of stress. So getting the men to empty themselves is actually much beneficial to us in a nuclear family and the larger community as it were. So I
think we should have businesses. You're talking about businesses there to some extent, and I think businesses have a responsibility to have that openness within the business. I mean, there's a film that I show on some of my training. It's PwC, and it's called This Is Me, and I would recommend anyone. You can get it on YouTube. It's This Is Me by PricewaterhouseCoopers or PwC, and it's just talking head interviews with various people within their organization, including very senior people within PwC, talking about their mental health. And it's so refreshing. It's
It
so
is.
refreshing to hear people who are opening up, and there are men involved in that, although most of them are women, but there's a couple of men involved in that. And it's great to hear people opening up about their mental health. More than that, though, it's so important that PwC have created an environment where people feel they can speak about things like that in the workplace, and make people aware of it. I mean, one of the ladies in there, um, she's a partner within PwC. Well, that's heavy stuff. That those people earn a lot of money and make very big decisions within a
Yeah.
very big multinational organization. And there's 2 or 3 partners interviewed on that tape, and she gets interviewed, and she talks about how her mental health struggles came about, which was as a result of losing several children for miscarriage. Eventually, she had a successful pregnancy, but she was absolutely overcome with protectionism and worry about this child, that this child wouldn't survive. And as a result of that, it created her anxiety, created her to feel like she had an eating disorder. So she was very open about that. But she says, if anyone told me 8 years ago that I'd have a mental health problem, I would not believe them. I'm a strong, successful, driven woman. And I'm not going, I would never have thought that I'd have suffered from a mental health condition. But here I am as a partner within PwC telling you now that it did happen. She is being interviewed very openly. And that is a great fact, that somebody as senior as that in that business feels they can talk about that. And there are 2 or 3, I think there's 2 men on that tape. And one of them, again, is a senior partner within that business. And he says, why wouldn't I talk about my mental health? I don't see it being any different if I talk about one time I broke my wrist to now I've got something wrong in my head. Why can I not tell you that when I can tell you about my wrist? So for people within that business to create that culture is fantastic, but it's rare. It's rare.
It is.
That's one of the problems.
It is. And I think you and I, Gavin, are in a good place because we are both aware about this. And with our employees as well, we can talk to them, tell you, open up, just be in a safe place, talk about it and not be judged about it. And I think, again, the reason why people don't talk about it is they probably think, oh, I'll be judged. They'll think I'm a psycho. They'll think I'm this, But, it's okay. It's
Again,
okay to cry. It's okay to have this emotions because we all have different baggages that we're dealing with or different issues, and they affect us differently. I have my issues as well, and sometimes talking about it really leaves a whole weight out of my own well-being. Another thing, again, I do, I mean, we're not talking about actions we can take, but I'm just going to throw this in. Another thing, again, that I do is I write, I journal a lot. So sometimes you want that safe space, but you haven't been able to create that safe space. But when you offload everything in your mind into your journal, you half of it is fantastic. You actually feel as though you've poured out yourself to someone else, But I would just say,
my wife keeps a journal. Yeah, my wife keeps a journal.
Yeah, so
she
then
swears
I send you my wellness
it,
journal. Then we've just created a wellness journal. I should send you a copy.
Right. Okay.
For otherwise,
it's not,
only if you tell me you're going to use it, then I will send you 2 copies.
So my problem is with stress with journals is it would add to my stress because I'd be worried about having to go up and fill my journal out. So it would add to my stress. So I don't see it as being something that works for me. But that's the great thing about coping strategies. You find out what works for you.
Exactly.
And what works for you might not work for somebody else. And it's so important that you do find out what works for you. And that's why men need to start talking and be more open about their mental health, because that is a coping strategy. And if they don't do that, then they are missing out on a very, very good coping strategy that will help them to relieve their anxiety and stress and depression and other mental health problems. And just opening up about it and how they're feeling will it's amazing how emancipating that can be, and how that makes you feel so much better.
Mm-hmm.
It's really very similar to what you're doing in your journal. I'm just not much of a writer. I just feel I don't want to have that pressure on me that every night I've got to go up and fill that damn thing out. So for me, that doesn't work. But what does work for me is a very similar thing, but actually verbalizing that rather than
Mm-hmm.
writing it down. So for me, it's about, if I need to download to my wife or to my friends or to other family members, then I feel I can do that. And so that's my journal, if you like. That's my version of my journal. I also have an exercise that I do, that I train when I do my training, which is called the stress container exercise. And that's looking at what's in your stress container. So you just look at what's in your stress container. It's a bit like journaling. So you might like this. So you just write down what's causing you stress right now. And you think, how full is my stress container? Is my stress container overflowing, or is it okay? Yeah. So that's the first thing. But what I always train is look at what's in your stress container when you've written it down, and then say, right, what's in there that I can't control?
Mm-hmm.
So an example of that would be, I trained a lady a couple of years ago now, and she wrote in her stress container in big letters across the top of the stress container, traffic jams. Right? And I said to her, but traffic jams, you can't control a traffic jam. You're in a traffic jam, you're in a traffic jam. You're going to be late, you're going to be late. You can't change it. You can't make the traffic jam go away.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, it shouldn't be in your stress container. Now, I know that's easier said than done. You can only control the controllables. And what you can control in that case is phone your friend up, phone your colleague up, phone your customer up, whoever it is you're meant to be meeting, and say you're going to be late.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do. So that shouldn't be in your stress container. Get it out of there. And there's other things that might be in your stress container that you can't control. Get it out of there. Other things that are in there that that are just going to resolve themselves. So what's in the stress container that's just going to resolve itself anyway? Again, it shouldn't be in your stress container. It shouldn't be causing you stress. It's going to sort itself out. So get it out of there. So in itself, that's a coping strategy. So what you've done is you've taken things out of your stress container. And then what's left, the idea then is whatever's left is put a plan in place of how you're going to resolve those things. So it could be work stuff, it could be relationship stuff, it could be financial stuff, it could be all sorts of things. It doesn't matter what it is. Put a plan in place as to how you're going to resolve it, and then prioritize it.
Mm-hmm.
And my way of prioritizing it is I like to do the easy stuff first, because I'm a list ticker. Okay, so I like ticking off lists. So for me, if I do a couple of the easy things first, I'm more likely to be more motivated to do more difficult things, because I've ticked a few things off. Yeah. But other people, it might be get the big things done first, get them out of the way. Different people are motivated in different ways. So whatever way you want to do it, that's fine. But get the stuff out of your stress container. And we all have stress, and stress can be a healthy thing. It doesn't have to be an unhealthy thing if it's manifested in the right way. Everyone needs a bit of stress. You need deadlines to make you do things. You need to have some levels of stress to function. So stress isn't a bad thing. It's just managing it. And so that stress container exercise is a great way of managing your stress. And that is a bit like journaling, because you're basically writing stuff down and you're taking them out. So it's a bit like journaling. But that's an exercise you can actually, once you've practiced it a few times, you can do it in your head. So I do. That's what I do. So that's the other thing I do. So I do talk to people. I do open up to people. That's a coping strategy. But also I do my stress container exercise in my head and work out how I'm going to resolve things that are in my stress container.
Yeah. So I mean, in this few minutes, we've spoken about 3 different tips you can do. I'm just going to reset the room and just to put some points out that we've spoken about just in this past few minutes. Ways we can tips to cope with stress. Journal, speak to somebody, or have a stress container. And those are 3 things that can easily be done. And as I said initially, there's simple steps you take to ensure that you live a healthy lifestyle. So that's just to reset the room and just to put out the points that I wanted people to take away to take home.
and they're not specifically about toxic masculinity, which is meant to be the subject matter, but we went off on a tangent, which I think was a
Exactly. I
good
was going to say
tangent.
that. Let's come back to our topic.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
let's talk
What was
back
that
to
again?
so this is, you know, as I said to you, these things have a life of their own. You think you're going in one direction, and then something comes, and then you're going in a different direction.
Well, they're
But
all
then,
related, aren't they?
yes,
They're all related. At the end of the day, you know, coping strategies are required for everybody, you know, and whatever your coping strategies are, whatever works for you to help you to relieve your stress, your anxiety, or your depression, whatever it is that you're struggling with, you know, your coping strategies are so important, and you need to work out what those coping strategies are and what works for you, and put them in place. And for men, talk about toxic masculinity, you know, for men, the first thing is to realize that they are struggling, and not actually just try to live through it and try and manage, you know, man up, you know, that man up society we talked about at the start. Don't just man up, but actually find ways of dealing with it, whether that's talking to people or whether that's other coping strategies like we've talked around. And there's lots of stuff. You know, Tom Daley, the diver, the British diver that won the gold medal in the Olympics, you know, he's taken up knitting. Yeah. He's taken up knitting.
What? I didn't hear that.
Knitting. He knits. He knits jumpers.
And that's fantastic. And that is such a great, I mean, I do tapestry.
Right. So similar idea. It's so fantastic. Relaxing. And he talks around how that's helped him to get in his head in the right place, because it's a coping strategy for him. Yeah. But it relieves his stress and his anxiety and everything else. So it doesn't have to be anything particularly sexy, excuse the expression, doesn't be anything particularly outlandish. It can be something very simple, but it doesn't matter what it is. It's finding what that is for you, and you know, whether that's you know, to do with toxic masculinity or not to do with toxic masculinity. It's really important we find those coping strategies.
It's amazing you said so. I mean, this is my first time I've seen heard of a man knitting, but you know, it's such a great, you know, you could cook, you can do so many things. So I mean, let's hope we don't move away from the subject matter so much. So what do you think are the risk factors involved in toxic masculinity in terms of people's mental health?
Well, obviously the fact that we've talked around toxic masculinity, that people you suppress their emotions and want to appear strong, you know, the main thing then is they don't talk and open up about their feelings. So and we have mentioned this earlier on, but talking is a great therapy, and sharing a thought or behavior is a good thing. And friends will often have a 20/20 vision on your life that you don't have because you're so close to it. Because we're all great at telling our friends how to solve problems, aren't we? We're not so good at solving our own problems. So actually, if you do open up to your friends, or you open up to your family members, they're more likely to have a more realistic and balanced viewpoint of where you are than you are, especially if you're in that spiral. Because if you're in that spiral we talked about earlier on, you're thinking very negatively about yourself and about your life, then you're not going to be thinking very straight about solutions, because you're not in that place. You're going down that spiral. So talking about it is more likely to come up with things that are going to help you and help you those mental health, rather than spiraling to that very dark place at the bottom of the vortex. The second risk is that self-medication we've talked around. You know, that self-medication with drugs and alcohol is a big risk, because men will self-medicate rather than talking. We are generalizing, obviously, and some women do self-medicate, and some men do actually talk. But in terms of majorities, the majority of men will resort to self-medication, and the majority of women will talk to their friends. And we've talked around that alcohol and drugs is harmful, not just to your mental health, but obviously to your physical health as well. And has a big effect on you overall. And I think the figures are that 70% of autopsies, suicide autopsies, found that there was excess alcohol or drugs in the bloodstream. So it's obviously is very strongly linked to suicidal behaviour as well.
Yeah.
So the third risk is that suicidal behaviour, because you're more likely to have suicidal thoughts, suicidal behaviour, or actually have suicidal acts if you're resorting to alcohol and drugs, or if you're not opening up your feelings because of that toxic masculinity. And toxic masculinity also creates a sort of peer pressure that stops men seeking help. So it's actually self-generating. If people are creating that atmosphere where it's not okay to not be okay, then people will actually stop talking about it. And somebody who gets shouted down, we talked about this earlier on, somebody who gets shouted down from in a group for starting talking about their feelings, oh, don't be a girl's blouse, just man up, that will not encourage anybody else in the group to talk. So that is that peer pressure. So those are the sort of main risk factors around toxic masculinity, really, in terms of people's mental health.
I was just going to ask a question. So in a group of men, and someone is talking about their issues, and somebody says, "Oh, man up." Do you not think the person that said "man up" actually does need help as well, and just trying
Of
to
course,
hide
yeah.
behind the facade that I'm a man?
Almost certainly, Duntan, almost certainly, but that doesn't change the fact that that person is probably going to get the support of the group in that environment, and therefore their viewpoint will be the one that is prevalent within the room. I do think that is gradually changing. First of all, I think it'd be very unlikely that a man would start that conversation with a group of men anyway. But if they were to, in my experience, in my friendship groups and people that I'm involved with, and obviously I am an older man, and so my friends tend to be a bit older as well, so perhaps a little bit more entrenched in that viewpoint. But I think it would be very rare for men to talk about their mental health, and if they did, I think the vast majority of groups of men would shout that down in the way that I described, man up, or don't be a girl's blouse, or for goodness sake, what are you worried about? That's nothing to worry about. Just get on with it, kind of thing. So I think that definitely is the case. As I say, I think it is getting better. I think, and I actually think that COVID has helped that. Because people are more open about their mental health because of COVID. So the one only good thing I can think that's come out of COVID is that.
People are talking more.
That talking, people talking about it more is obviously a good thing. Encouraging that is better. So there is more tolerance, but I just think there's such a long way to go.
Yeah, and I mean, just talking about COVID, as you said, and I think COVID is what was making us to have this conversation as well, because I know that with COVID, everyone was locked up, and that even though we're not still out of the woods, but there's been a lot of increase in mental health cases, and not just in adults as well, and with children as well. Earlier on today, I saw on the news that there was a great concern about children and mental health, and because children are not talking, or people just think, oh, they're children, they don't understand what's going on. So, but we have dealt with this in the past, so I'm not just going to dive into this. So if you've missed our session of the effects of COVID on children, please go to our YouTube page, Refreshed Healthy Living, and it was there, because there we spoke up with a pediatric psychiatrist who dealt with that. So in some cases, I just think COVID has allowed us to talk and allowed some men to talk as well, which is good. Okay.
It is good. And I think the stigma and discrimination around mental health has had a big breakthrough.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's still a long way to go, but there's definitely been a breakthrough, which is very, very encouraging. And hopefully it will continue, because you talked about young people. I think the figure in the UK, this is from memory, but I think 76% of mental health issues in the UK start before the age of 18. So that shows you the prevalence that there is in children. So So it is a very severe problem,
It
and it's
is.
only going to get if we A, recognise that that's the case, and B, have things in place to support that, whether that's at schools and colleges, whether that's in society in general, whether that's in the workplace. But we need to have mental health first aiders all around the place, people with skills to be able to support that. But also, you talked about the mental the health service in Nigeria. You know, we've got a great health service, but
We
it's
have
absolutely,
yeah.
it's bursting. You know, it's fit to burst because of COVID. The pressures on it are immense, and so the waiting lists for talking therapies on the NHS at the moment are 12 to 18 months. You know, so the support is slightly strained, to say the least. And yes, there's private care, but that's at a cost. You know, the cost is £60 an hour or something for a talking therapist. You can't really afford that on top of your normal outgoings.
I mean, I would say you're actually in a better place than we are in Nigeria, because in Nigeria it's still like a taboo to say you're stressed. It's like a taboo to say that oh, I have mental, I have a meltdown, I need to take a break, you know. And my prayer is, and I'm hoping is that eventually we would open up in Nigeria, and people would come and speak up, because we do have a mental. And one thing I must give kudos to the Lagos state government in Nigeria is that they do have a mental line. Well, Lagos, it's called Lagos Mind, where the therapists at the back, they can talk to you. So for those in Nigeria looking for who to talk to or where to turn to, please Google up Lagos Mind, and it's a toll-free number, and the people there waiting to help you as well. So it's a step in the right direction. We're not as advanced as you are in the UK, but we are going somewhere. So can we?
Yeah, well, any help's going to be better, hasn't it? You know, and we've got Calm, we've got Shout, we've got Papyrus. There's lots of good helplines available, charity helplines that are available, but there's still stresses and strains in the NHS. There's a good point just made by Kemi on the chat.
On the chat, yeah.
Our world has equated masculinity to humanity. Our sons are learning from our fathers. It's okay to be vulnerable as men. Yeah, I mean that's really what it's all about here.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe so thanks for that comment.
And I find out, just to buttress Kemi's point, I find that most of my coachees are men, and I find that until we get to the point where they trust me enough and they're vulnerable, is when the healing process starts.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Unfortunately, we've done so many sessions where they could have been vulnerable in the beginning, and we can start the healing process. Towards the end, I think maybe it does. Then, hello, my money is going. I'm about to end the session. I need to get something out of it. Then they open up, and then we start dealing with the issues. You know, but when I have a female coach, it's almost instantly she's willing to talk and willing to go through the process. So,
and I think that's a natural sort of masculine response almost, and it is what we've been talking about really, in that sort of they see it as a sign of weakness to open up about their feelings, and as Kemi has said in her thing there, it's okay for men to be vulnerable, but the problem is men think that is showing weakness, and if they think it's showing weakness, they're worried that they may not do well in their career because people see them as being weak. They may think they won't do well in their relationships, people see them as weak. They might think they will do well in sport because people see them as weak. They think they were going to do well with their friendship because people see them as weak. So they feel it affects all aspects of their life, but actually it's okay not to be okay, and we need to make that a cultural change in society, but also a cultural change within our businesses. That film I told you about with This Is Me at PwC, for them to feel they can have that conversation in front of their company and represent their company and be open about their mental health in that way is so refreshing. And we need to have that right through as many companies as we can to people to feel they can open up and that it won't affect their career. Because that's the feeling is that if they did open up to that, people will see them as weak and therefore not promote them within the business. So the fact that PwC have opened up to that is amazing, and I'm sure more companies can do that, create that culture.
Yeah, I think now we're talking about society. I think it's a good time to talk about what we can do as society, and we are the society. What we can do to reduce this, to reduce the prevalence of this toxicity within our male gender.
Yeah, it is creating that culture. It's doing what Kemi just said in the chat. There is to make it okay for people for men to be vulnerable and to open up, and also not to judge people, because that judgment needs to not be to be there. So create that culture. It's okay to not to be okay, and encourage men to talk. But there's been many initiatives to encourage men to talk, certainly in the UK. And I do believe that things are improving, but we're not seeing changes at the moment in the statistics. The statistics are still showing 75% male suicides. That's not changed. In fact, 8% growth in male suicides in Great Britain over the last 4 years. So the figures are actually getting actually worse in the suicide figures. In terms of the mental health side of things, the problem with looking at figures for that is things like diagnosis of anxiety, depression, and suicide, and stress. Those figures are skewed because women are more likely. You talked about your husband not going to the doctor. Women are more likely to go to the doctor to get the diagnosis. So actually, women's figures for those areas, things like panic attacks, panic disorders, anxiety attacks, all those kind of things, women are twice as commonly diagnosed. But I think those figures are completely skewed because men just don't go and get the diagnosis. They try and man up. So the figures are actually wrong. But then you look further across at the figures and you look at alcoholism and abuse of drugs, and men are much higher. And they're higher because they've self-medicated. So and you can't hide that. So that we need to make it okay not to be okay. We need to get it okay for men to go to the doctor. We need to make it okay for men to show weakness. We need to make it okay for men to talk about how they're feeling and not try to man up. And that peer pressure, we can actually make that peer pressure a positive peer pressure. To say, it's okay to talk to me.
Yeah, it's okay. So I was just going to talk about that as well. That we have said society, but what are the things we can do in society to give men the comfort that it's okay to not to be okay? So we've spoken about, we can talk about it. It's okay for you to go to a man and give him a hug and say, it's all right. Things are all right. Sometimes it's not even the words we say. Sometimes the actions actually speak more. I see a man that's as distressed, or I identify a man that I think at this point in time just needs a nice hug, right? Embrace him and say, look, you know what? I'm not even going to judge you. I just know that you. And then you find that by just that embracement, the man breaks down. It's vulnerable. It talks, and the healing process starts. And as Kemi said, the fathers, most of our children learn from example, not from what we tell them, but from how we behave as well. So these things are behavioral. So if I'm in my home and my child or my male child does something, I think even as mothers as well, we should turn and say, you know what, it's all right. It's okay. As I would treat a female child, I shouldn't treat a male child separately. And I think with that, we'll start building the culture from when they're young. With the older men, I think it might be a struggle, but we can still try.
Yeah, and I think it is changing gradually, even in my age group. but it's also about things like you're putting initiatives in place, whether that's local, regionally, or national initiatives about it's okay not to be okay. Put campaigns in place. The call lines that you talked about in Nigeria, but we've got them in the UK as well. More call lines available to make it people can open up anonymously. TV programs. There's been a couple of TV programs in the UK recently around opening up about feelings and men talking about their feelings.
Really?
And it's been really well done. There's a guy called Roman Kemp who's son of Spandau Ballet star, and he's a Radio DJ, and he's quite well known. And he did a film on television around. Don't ask somebody once, ask them twice, basically. So, are you okay? We do it all the time, don't we? Are you okay? Yeah, you. We do it all the time in the UK. That's what we ask our question. Are you okay? Yeah, you. But don't ask it like that. Ask that, but then say, no, seriously, how are you feeling?
Exactly.
Ask it twice. Yeah. So that was a big thing in that film, because one of his friends took his own life, and he feels that he didn't know how he was feeling because he hadn't asked him that question twice. He just had the sort of skimmed the surface, if you like, around people's feelings. So that was that Roman Kemp film is a really good one if you can look that up on catch up TV anywhere. But also things like celebrities and sports people talking about their behaviours and being real about their mental health. Films like that one at PwC, This Is Me, films like that, and people opening up about their mental health and seeing, I'm a successful person, but I've had mental health issues.
Yeah.
I'm a successful sportsman, but I've had mental health issues. Those people, as they become more and more prevalent, is more likely that people will then say, if it's okay for that person to say that, it's okay for me to say that.
For me to say that as well.
Yeah. And then we should have PR around success stories, suicide survivors talking about their stories and people talking about how they might have struggled with their mental health and how talking about it's helped them to get through things. And that doesn't cost much. Doing stories like that doesn't cost a lot. It's about being creative. It's about being imaginative. It's about getting things out there and getting people to talk more about their mental health and making it okay for people to talk, male or female. But we're talking about masculine, toxic masculinity here. So, men in particular, because they don't generally talk, finding people who will talk about their situation, particularly if they're icons, celebrities or sports people in particular, I think would be a very strong message to get out there. And there will be people that we can get to talk. I'm sure there will be people who will open up about their mental health to help other people.
Yeah, because we cannot have a copycat society in England or here, whereby when you think somebody's done it, and I think really not just copycat like that, but I think somebody taking the first initiative, as you said, opens up a lot more. If I see,
it'll open the floodgates. Yeah, it'll open the floodgates. If you get somebody to high profile to start talking about it, then it will have other people talking about it as well. And I think there's no doubt we've all struggled. We've all been there. We've all had bad days, bad weeks, bad months. We've all had that, and we've all got through that in our own way. Some people have had to get support and some help. Some people have managed to work their way through it themselves and get out of that spiral. And some of us are still in that spiral. Some of us are still somewhere in that spiral that we can't get out of it, and actually we need somebody to help us to get out of it. That could be by talking to people. That could be by going to the doctor. That could be by getting some therapy. That could be by a combination of all three.
Exactly.
And so we just need to encourage men to do that. So that's my sort of soapbox chat about how men should help themselves and get themselves out of the situation.
There's one thing you said, and I just want to pick on that as well. That sometimes when we all say, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" I mean, how's it going? But you really should ask people, if you really want them to talk and you really are concerned about them, you say, how are you doing? And
yeah,
have an eye-to-eye contact. Have that eye
yeah.
contact and say, how are you doing? Really stress on how are you doing.
Especially,
And I
especially
really,
if we've got some concerns about somebody in particular,
yeah.
you know, if we don't think it's really being themselves, you know, we might think it's okay to say, "You okay? Yeah, you great. I've asked him. That's fine. Move on." But that's not enough. You know, you need to say,
It's
"No,
not.
really, no, you're not being yourself. You know, how are you? Really, how are you?"
Yeah.
And you know, buy the person a coffee. Go and have a chat with them out of the office or out of the without anybody else being around. Get them into a moment where they can open up to you, and it's amazing when the right environment's there and the right timing's there, and they feel you're not being judged. Then they will open up.
That's certainly will, because I see that works for me as well. So I see people and I know that they're not feeling up, they're not 100%, and I'm like, oh, why don't
Mm.
we just grab lunch or grab dinner, and then when we
Yeah,
start after the person, I'm like, really, how are you
yeah,
doing? I mean,
yeah. Break bread.
rather than
Break
saying, are
bread's
you
always good.
okay? That just, I would say I'm okay because I really don't want to come out and say, but and this just doesn't. This goes for both male and female.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
how are
agree. I
you
think it's
doing?
yeah,
So that's a
yeah,
question.
yeah.
And we're coming up to the holiday season where there's so much, and in as much as this season is festive as well, it's Christmas, it's all Christmas bells, Christmas lights, and everything. A lot of
Mm.
people go into depression a lot at this point, at this time of the year as well.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
yeah.
depression at this point in time. So one of the things for
It's the
those
highest.
on
It's the
yes,
highest time for relationships to break up, isn't it?
yeah,
Christmas and New Year is the highest prevalence of breakups of relationships.
yes,
So it just shows you that it's not always a happy time. So you know, a lot of strains on relationships and a lot of strains on
on
you know, it brings
resources,
things to a
so
head
many
sometimes.
things.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And as you say, male or female. So, but that's my toxic masculinity feelings on toxic masculinity, and I think it's something that will change over time, but it needs us all to understand it, male or female, to
Mm-hmm.
understand why it's there, how it's there, and how we can help to get around that just by opening up the conversations and getting men to feel it's all right to open up about their feelings and be open
Mm-hmm.
about that. We create that non-judgmental environment where they feel
Environment. Yeah. So Abimbola is saying, I feel bullying is another area that affects a lot of people from a tender age. True. Where classmates struggle to empathize or make boys feel bad for their vulnerability. They grow up struggling. So that's another issue. We really need to, when a child is bullied as well or feels bullied, that's an area
mm,
that, is very sensitive. We need to be able to talk to the child and talk to the child bullying the other child or the group of children bullying a particular child because, yes, it affects them as they grow up because they start feeling less of themselves and they will
mm,
not want to open up because of the experience they felt in the past. So if we do know of
yeah.
a child being bullied or somebody, and you don't have to be a child to be bullied. Adults to get bullied,
No,
so
I've been bullied as an adult. Yeah, I've been bullied as an adult, and it really, what I would say about bullying is that when you're being bullied, it's very difficult to challenge that because you feel it's you that's the problem,
yeah,
not the person that's bullying. So it's other people that need to spot it and other people that need to support the person that's being bullied. But the other thing about bullying is bullying can have a long-term effect on somebody's mental health. So it really does need to be stamped out. We do need to address that if we see it happening or recognize that it's happening, whether that's in
exactly.
the workplace, whether that's in the school, whether that's wherever it might be. Now, I've got an autistic child, and my wife and I were very concerned that he was going to get bullied at school. He's now 16, so he's at college now. But I have to say that the school he was at did an amazing job. of
Fantastic.
not allowing that to happen. When I was at school, I know that that person, my son, would have got bullied. I actually don't know of any example where he was in all his school life, which is incredible because he is, different. So for him not to be bullied shows that things have improved and have changed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we were lucky. I don't think that happens everywhere. But if we can stamp it out, then we should do everything we can to stamp it out. I was actually bullied in the workplace, and it's a very difficult place to be, and because you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to again show failure, you don't want to be, and you feel you're the one that's being that's wrong because you feel you deserve it in an ironic sort of way. Looking back on it now, I think how daft that was, but at the time, I believed it was me that was the problem, not the person who was bullying. So it's others that probably need to help more than you yourself.
Exactly. And you said that right as well. And you just buttressed as well what I was trying to say, that bullying is just not doesn't end in schools. In our adult lives as well, there's some form of bullying going on as well, and being able to identify it and address it as well, especially in the work
Yeah.
environment as well. There's a lot of bullying in the work environment, and it's being able
Yeah.
to address that and address the people that are doing the bullying, because they have a lot of issues. I believe they're just looking for a victim to vent out whatever is going through their minds at that point in time. So they need
Have the
they need
confidence.
they need help as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think having the confidence to challenge it is where I would say as well. Have the confidence to challenge it, because actually bullies don't react well to being challenged. So sometimes that's but it's having the confidence to do that. It's not so easy. You need some support.
Yeah.
To do that.
And I think people the workspace space exactly, and the HR department has a lot of work to do to ensure that the person being bullied is supported, and the bullier is supported as well, whichever way you want. You know what I mean? So
the bully.
yeah. So I mean, we have said quite a bit this evening. One of the questions I was going to ask you was what actions we can take to get men to open up more and to see that it's okay.
Well, I talked about that.
With that already.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, those initiatives, those campaigns, those call lines, the celebrities and sports people talking about their mental health, get the sort of icons of the world to talk about their mental health situations. And then those suicides, those PR stories, success stories, if you like, about people who are willing to talk about how they've got through things by talking and making it okay to talk. I think those are the actions we can take to get men to open up more. So hopefully, and then none of that costs money. All of it, or some of it might cost a bit of money, but it's not expensive things to do. It's just time and thought. Sort of considerate action, to get things moving, and charities could have a big part to play in that, really.
I think really it's a leaf we have to borrow from you, or from the international world, as it were, that we should run this kind of campaigns in Nigeria and let people know that's okay. It's okay to talk about your mental health. It's okay to seek help. And I mean, so in Nigeria, especially in Lagos, there's a particular mental facility we have, the Yaba Psychiatrics. And when people talk about mental health, they just assume they'll be locked up. And mental health doesn't mean you have to be locked up or under locks and keys with chains. No. I could be normal and still have a lot of mental health issues going on with me. It's been recognizing it and dealing with it. And I would say that if you do or know someone who is going through some form of stress or bottling things up, please advise them to seek help. That there's Gavin, there's myself, there's Lagos Mind, there are things. And the thing about the pandemic, which we were talking about, is that now you can seek help anywhere in the world. There's telemedicine, and there's free online things you can do, the free courses or things you can listen to, like the PwC thing you spoke about. I'm sure if we Google it, we'll find it. We can talk about, we can listen to it, and I'm sure it would help us as well. So one of the things I would say is that please don't bottle up your emotions, especially as we're getting to December, where it's Christmassy, where things are supposed to be jolly, but there's nobody can share your joy, and nobody can share your sorrow, and nobody knows the extent of both, only you. And if you do know this, then there's no need to pretend to think, oh, it's Christmas and you go with the flow. We have heard statistics tonight that during Christmas, during the festive period, a lot of suicide and a lot of mental health cases really go on the increase. Don't be one of those statistics. Don't let your friends or loved ones be any of those statistics. Please seek help. Speak to myself, speak to Gary, speak to Lagos Mind, speak to wherever you are in the world where you can seek help. I mean, internationally, there's a lot of help. In Nigeria, it's opening up gradually. So we're thankful for that. And we would only get better in Nigeria if my Nigerians here are able to come up and we'll work together, collaborate, and make sure that we create a mental health facility or mental not facility, that's not a good word, space where we can be open and we can talk about it. And we all know everybody, especially if you live in Lagos, there's something that will stress you. If it's not the traffic, it's the downfall drivers. So the downfall drivers is the Okadas are the motorcyclists, the downfall drivers are the bus drivers, which are different from what you have in the UK. There'll be one thing or the other to stress you, but do not let these things rent space in your head. You need to free that mind. You're only there's
control
something I want to say. Sorry?
Control the controllables.
Exactly.
Only control what you can control.
Yeah. Exactly. So you would allow yourself to be stressed because you've invited stress. You can uninvite stress by putting it in a stress jar, by speaking to somebody, by journaling. So a few things we spoke about this evening. It's well past our time. Gavin, I did say to you that 1 hour goes just like that. We've done 1 hour, 20 minutes, and I'm sure that if given the time, we can still talk more about this issue.
Yeah. Well, we could go into all sorts of tangents. We've done a couple of tangents, but we didn't do too badly. We managed to keep on the main subject most of the time. So.
Yes.
But thank you very much, Duntan. It's been very, very interesting. Thank you very much for hosting, and hopefully people found that interesting.
Yes, so thank you very much, guys, for coming on board tonight. Thank you for joining. And if you want to repeat or if you want to listen to this again, it'll be on our IG Live soon, and it'll be on our YouTube page. And then we'll summarize what we've done tonight. So if you want to share that with someone, please do. Our whole aim is to make sure the next person is healthy as well. Gary, I'm sure we're still going to have you on for other things. This is just one. Remember, we have a lot of topics to talk about. But I thought this was very, very timely, and we need to deal with this like now. So we may have Gary. We'll have Gary again in the new year.
Gavin.
Oh, I keep on saying Gavin. I'm so sorry. Oh, gee.
Gavin. You can have Gary if you want, but maybe better to have Gavin.
So we'll have Gavin again in the new year with new topics, and for us in Refresh series, I wouldn't say it's the end. We're supposed to have another one next week, but our guest is mixed up at dates. He has a family wedding, and we're trying to fix that somewhere before the year runs out. If not, you may just have me talking to you about something to do with self-care for the festive season. Or I may have my friends, Gavin, I may have Helen, I may have shows again. We may just do something for Christmas, before Christmas, so that we can always go back to us on self-care. But if not, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a prosperous 2022. But I hope to speak to you then before then. Gavin, on behalf of everybody and Refreshed, I want to say thank you very much. We look forward to having another session with you next year. And thank you guys for being present. Thank you for those that contributed. We're really very grateful. And have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks.
Merry Christmas to you all.
Bye.
Bye now.